Ian Pace, 2020. I suggest you check out a band called Spirit. They were prog rock before anyone thought of the name prog rock. Spirit's first album was released on the 22nd of January 1968. It's a remarkable record for many reasons. Nothing has ever sounded quite like it before or after. It's remarkable also for the fact the band who recorded it at the time had only been together for a matter of months, and that 3/5 of the band were still teenagers. Randy California, the lead guitarist, had just turned 16. But every member of the band had talent to burn. They could switch musical styles effortlessly, whether it be freeform jazz, jazz fusion, jazz rock, folk, country, blues, pop, heavy rock. Alice Cooper said on his radio show in 2006 that he'd seen the band play back in the day at a beach party, and they were the most talented bunch of musicians he'd ever seen. Spirit's lineup was Randy California lead guitar, Mark Andes on bass, Jay Ferguson on vocals, John Locke on keyboards, and Ed Cassidy on drums. The backbone of the album is provided by drummer Ed Cassidy, who at 45 years old in 1968 was considered ancient. Before Spirit, he played for 30 years as a career jazz drummer. He played with such legends as Art Pepper, Cannonball Adderley and Roland Kirk. But by this time, in his own words, he was bored to tears with the jazz scene. It's Cassidy's cast iron timekeeping that holds the band together. Whatever musical excursion the young guns want to go on, it's Cassidy that holds everything down with his superb drumming. A lot of reviewers over the years have mentioned the album's at times dreamy, psychedelic tinged songs, but within those songs the band takes some very unexpected detours. Gramophone Man, for example, which starts off very dreamy, very late 1960s, with Beach Boys style harmonies, and then suddenly out of the blue mid-song goes straight into a bebop jazz section. Or note the freeform improvisation at the end of the track Straight Arrow. Side 1 kicks off with Fresh Garbage. In the summer of 1967 there had been a strike by the garbage collectors in Topanga Canyon, and the rubbish had just piled up and piled up and piled up. But the song is about how much we waste, how much we just dispose of every day. I guess you could call it one of the very first ecological protest songs. The world's a can for your fresh garbage. As the song opens, listen to that main riff. Locke, California, Andes and Cassidy sound like they're joined at the hip, moving in unison. 1 minute 8 seconds, California's guitar feedback leads us into a cool, jazzy electric piano solo in 6/8 time from John Locke. But listen just a little bit deeper to Andy's bass playing just behind that electric piano. It's just superb. Pink and William Orbit thought that opening riff so good they pinched it for her song Feel Good Time 36 years later. Even if you've never played a Spirit track, you probably heard some of their music somewhere, so much has the band been sampled over the years. Uncle Jack, which features a monster of a riff from Randy California, and it's given extra power by Cassidy and Andes playing just underneath that riff. California's solo here is a thing of joy and beauty as he double tracks it and provides these beautiful harmonised leads. Andy Powell of Wishbone Ash was a huge fan of Randy's guitar playing, especially those harmonised solos. Mechanical World, Ian Pace. 50 years later, I still can't work out the time of this track. It's a glorious piece of music, and the guitar sound and the guitar solo is still mesmeric. Do yourself a favour and listen to it. How can you describe this track? There's nothing that sounds remotely like it. It was written by Mark Andes, who was bedbound with a severe bout of flu. It's about a guy who's about to be executed. He's on death row, and it's as dark as anything the Doors ever came up with. Jay Ferguson's vocals seem wrenched from the soul, and Ed Cassidy holds down that impossible time signature, while the rest of the band, aided by a horn section, punctuate the rhythm with staccato bursts of notes. Listen closely and you'll hear Randy California's guitar, itchy and restless, in the background. At 1 minute 21 seconds, California bursts forward and delivers one of the most beautiful lyrical guitar solos I've ever heard. It's all aided by Marty Page's string arrangement. At 2 minutes 12 seconds, Ed Cassidy's Funeral March drums accompanies Jay's sad lament. Once in my younger days, I had a girl to love. If you thought that first guitar solo was amazing, at 3 minutes 34 seconds, back comes California to top it. He wrings every little bit of emotion out of that guitar. As good as the record is, there was so much material that had to be left off the album. If you go to the 1996 expanded edition, there's a monumental slab of heavy metal stroke space rock called Veruska. Think Jimi Hendrix crossed with the Blue Oyster Cult and you'll be in the right ballpark. But they had so many songs they were playing in concert, so many of these jazz-tinged instrumentals where every member of the band would take flight. They were even doing covers of John Coltrane's Tunji. So let's go back a little bit to May 1967, when the newly formed Spirit started a residency at the Ash Grove, Melrose Avenue, Los Angeles. Randy California's uncle, Ed Pearl, owned the club and let the band play there on a Monday night, as that was usually a slow time for the club. The audiences on those nights were charged a nominal fee of $1 for what were in the beginning essentially rehearsals. Those early nights mostly consisted of family and friends turning up, but the band approached them like they were real concerts, playing up to 3 sets a night, with each set lasting around 40 minutes in length. Randy California had just turned 16, but the previous year had been part of Jimmy James and the Blue Flames, Jimi Hendrix's band. California had played with Hendrix for the entire 6 months he had a residency in New York, as Jimmy started to forge his reputation as a guitar god. The Blue Flames would play 6 sets a night, 7 days a week. It was an incredible musical education. Jimmy was so impressed by the young guitar prodigy, he asked him to join the band the afternoon of his very first New York solo gig. But California's incredible musical education had started way before that. He first picked up a guitar at the age of 5 years old and then was taught the rudiments of the instrument by his mother, Bernice. The Ash Grove was opened in 1958, and to save money on hotel bills, many performers would stay at Randy's house. Musicians being musicians, many impromptu jam sessions would take place, which Randy would beg to join in on. Can you imagine having Doc Watson, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, the Rising Suns, June Carter, Lightning Hopkins, Mance Lipscomb, all passing through? When Randy was about 13 years old, his mother paid Clarence White, the famous bluegrass country guitar picker, $20 to give Randy a lesson. Clarence pushed the money back, saying, "I'm sorry, you'd be wasting your money. There isn't much I can teach this kid." So Randy was joined in the band by Ed Cassidy, who by now in 1967 had married Randy's mother, John Locke. John had been classically trained as a pianist, and he had met Ed Cassidy before, and they had played together in a band called the New Jazz Trio, a hugely underrated player. John also brought superb skills as an arranger of music and as a composer. On bass, Mark Andes. Mark had been playing bass since high school and had played in various surf bands and in a short-lived band with Randy California called the Red Roosters. In 1966 he became a member of Canned Heat, but on hearing that Randy had returned to Los Angeles after the Hendrix gig, Andes quit Canned Heat to become part of the newly formed Spirit. Mark will always tell you that he does nothing special in his playing, but the list of bands he's been part of over the years would say something different. Spirit, Jojo Gunn, Dan Fogelberg, Firefall and Heart, amongst others. Mark just has a knack of providing just exactly what the music requires. Jay Ferguson, vocals. Jay was trained in classical piano from a young age, but at 16 he switched to banjo and formed a bluegrass group. His role in Spirit was primarily as lead vocalist, and in the early days Jay wrote the bulk of the band's material. So you have this huge range of musical influences and 5 guys who could really play, really knew their stuff, coming together to form a band. Within 2 months of playing at the Ash Grove, the word soon spread around the LA music community that this was a band that you just had to see. Every week the band just got better and better. And the range of material they were now performing was quite simply extraordinary. From John Coltrane numbers, to blues workouts, to jazzy instrumentals, gospel, soul, their own psychedelic tinged originals, even Santana-like jams. Randy California added to all this by bringing in the stuff he played with Hendrix the previous year, and the band started to include Hey Joe and Shotgun in the sets. As well as being able to do all the Hendrix guitar pyrotechnics, California was now forging a reputation as a very well-renowned jazz guitarist, so much so that when in town, Wes Montgomery would turn up to check out Randy's licks. That first Spirit album was a commercial success, reaching number 31 on the Billboard charts and staying on that chart for 6 months. Spirit would go on to record a further 3 albums: The Family That Plays Together, Clear, and their all-time masterpiece, The 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus. The original band split up in 1971, but in 1973 Randy California reformed the band with Ed Cassidy, and over the next 22 years they played with a variety of different musicians, but always with California and Cassidy in the band. Spirit continued to incorporate an array of musical styles, even in the 1990s, including reggae, and to do it all brilliantly. So, were Spirit prog? Were they progressive rock? Yes, for sure. They sure introduced a whole generation of us to different musical genres. They even recorded a jazz soundtrack for the movie The Model Shop in 1969, but this wasn't released until 2005. Spirit had a huge influence on aspiring musicians in the late 60s. We have to also remember that Randy California, when playing with Hendrix in New York, was also giving a very young Walter Becker guitar lessons. One last thing, when I think of Spirit, Randy California and progressive rock, I remember that in 1972 California appeared on one track on Peter Hamill's solo album, The Silent Corner and The Empty Stage. His guitar playing on that track is very, very Robert Fripp. And I always wonder if Hamill and California had played together more, where that would have led. So as they say, to be continued. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay well. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.